Yeah, okay.
People get
Okay,
long
I can pause it.
recording.
Okay, it's recording.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the annual National Conference of Black Political Scientists Presidential History Series. I am Sheila Harmon-Martin, the historian and archivist. Thanks for attending. The purpose of this series is to remember, and for some, to learn the history of our organization through the voices of presidents. Encodes was the vision of Dr. Jewel Prestige, Dr. Mac Jones, and others. In 1969, a meeting was convened at Southern University of 35 Black political scientists. That meeting was the beginning. And 52 years later, the organization continues to be the intellectual space for Black political scientists. But in those intervening years, several men and women, utilizing their leadership and resources, contributed to the growth and development of this organization. Unfortunately, many are no longer with us, but today is 4 of their stories. At each annual meeting, you will meet others through the Presidential History Series, recalling our history as our legacy continues. Our panelists are Dr. William Daniel, the 3rd president of the National Conference of Black Political Scientists, 1972 to 1973. A native Chicagoan who attended DuSalle High School, where one of his teachers was Timuel Black, longtime NCOBPS member and the legendary Chicago political activist.
He's 102.
He attended his first NCOBPS meeting in 1971 in Atlanta, and through his brief dedication and service, became its 3rd president a year later. He received all his degrees in political science from Upper Iowa University and University of Iowa, respectively. Dr. Daniels is Professor Emeritus of Rochester Institute of Technology, where he retired as professor and dean of the College of Liberal Arts. In his retirement, Dr. Daniels does occasional work as an arbitrator. Dr. Leslie Burrell McLemore, the 5th and 6th NCOBPS president, attended all of the founding NCOBPS meetings, Baton Rouge, New York, Atlanta. He served 2 terms because of the resignation of the 5th president. Growing up in Memphis, Tennessee, he's a graduate of Rusk College and receives his graduate degrees at Atlanta University and University of Massachusetts. Dr. McLemore is Professor Emeritus of Jackson State University, where he served most of his professional career in various roles, including in 2010 as the interim president of the university. Dr. Elsie Scott, the 11th NCOBPS president, is the director of the Ronald W. Walters Leadership and Public Policy Center at Howard University. Her previous leadership positions include president and CEO of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, executive director of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, and deputy commissioner of training for the New York Police Department. A native Louisianian, Dr. Scott received all her degrees in political science from Southern University, University of Iowa, and Atlanta University. Dr. Shelby Lewis, 12th NCOBPS president, also a Louisianian, is also a founding member of the organization who participated in the first gathering of Black political scientists held at Southern University. Dr. Lewis has worked approximately 60 years in the field of international development, training, and research in various African countries and at home, before culminating with her retirement in 2003 as the Vice President of International Development and Executive Director of the Global Center for the United Negro College Fund Special Programs. Dr. Lewis received all her degrees in political science from Southern University, University of Massachusetts, and the University of New Orleans. I'm proud to present to you Dr. Daniels, and the presenters will speak in that order.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for organizing the panel. I attended the 50th annual meeting in Southern. And at that time, I made some remarks. I was asked about the term of office, the year that I served, and I said we did some things. At that point, interestingly enough, I'd searched for some records, but I was not, I came across some, and I think I had submitted some to the archivist for the 25th anniversary. But since that time, I was in my basement rummaging through some file cabinets, and I found not the mother lode, but I have a lot of material, and I will make that material available to the archives. And so at this point, what I'll do is just refer to several of those documents, and if time permitting, I may go into detail, but I'm surrounded with material that I found, and I'm just delighted to be part of the panel now and can say something other than, I served as president. The question was asked, what were the challenges following the APS walkout? And that challenge was standing up a new professional organization. It was a challenge because I was on the council before I was president, of spreading the word, generating support. I can say, though, that interestingly enough, and I think all of you will know that the 800-pound gorilla in the room was the APSA, because wherever you went, people will say, well, what's the association? What's the relationship? And we've had, in our early years, we had quite a few discussions about what our relationship would be with APSA. Well, I found that the best way to respond to that, after being asked by my colleagues and many others, is that it wasn't really about APSA. It was about us. We were standing up a new organization, an organization that would address the needs from the Black perspective, would deal with Black professionals. And that's the way it worked for me for years and years throughout my career. Matter of fact, I prepared a statement for the National Review of Black Politics, and it is in volume 1, number 1, and that more or less chronicles the my years, my entire career as a Black political scientist. I came on at a very early age into Encodes, and then I retired. But I've been retired now for 16, 17 years. So that piece is available, and it talks about my upbringing in Chicago and my relationship with Tim Black as well. So one of the things to get to the issue at hand is I was asked early on about, I was asked for a copy of the state of the organization paper that was supposed to be available for the 1972-72 meeting. And I searched and I couldn't find it. And I knew I'd made some remarks, but without having them in hand, there was very little I could say, except, as I said before, that we were talking about some of the things that were important to us. But interestingly enough, here's what I found. The convention in both 72 and 73, they were organized. What the role of the president was to introduce the keynote address and make some remarks. And then the following day, there would be a presidential wrap session and a business meeting. And as luck would have it, I found newspaper accounts of both of those meetings. The Picayune, I guess it was a Times-Picayune of New Orleans, carried an article both about the keynote, and they also covered the rap session. So I can say something about what was said on those occasions. And as I said, I'll provide these newspaper accounts for the archives. But before that, there was also a month earlier, we had a fundraiser at the Museum of African Art in Washington for our GAP program. And there were two newspaper accounts of that meeting as well. So what I'll say here is that I'll just briefly indicate some of the remarks that were made at that occasion and at the GAP meeting, and at the presidential wrap session as well. The interesting thing about the meeting in Washington, and this was a fundraiser for Representative Burke, and she was the featured person there. Although we also had Barbara Jordan was there, Diggs was there, and there were other representatives as well. But Representative Diggs, when he spoke, he indicated that the Encodes was a sort of the Black Caucus of APSA. And so here again, I made some remarks about the fact that this was a standalone organization. We were responsible for our own finances, and we were addressing needs of Black political scientists. What we wanted to do was encourage more Blacks to become political scientists and professionals, and that we had an insufficient number of Black PhDs. I'll say more about that in a moment with regard to another piece. But we were encouraging people to become Black political scientists, and that this organization could indeed help politicians. We could help them in their election challenges, and we could help them with their redistricting. And so that's what I said on that occasion. And of course, there's an interesting article that is available for the archives. I will also note that at the business meeting last night, the president indicated that we may have a grant for redistricting available for the NCOBPS this year as well. At the wrap session, let me say before the wrap session, one of the important things, documents that I have available, I have a whole collection of every newsletter. And I want to thank, of course, Leslie McLemore was responsible for many of those as well. And of course, when I talk about budgeting, of course, Shelby was the treasurer, and we had a budget committee. But one of the things, these newsletters, I don't know about the minutes. I don't have minutes for these groups, but these newsletters are pretty much on target when they talk about there was discussion and disagreement. And then a little later, they say there was disagreement and discussion. So, but let me just say that the council meeting before the 72 meeting pointed out that, and I don't know who was responsible for what, but they wanted to show that we were active, that we were engaging in business that in issues that made sense to Black political scientists, that they would find this relevant. So at the GAP session, and there was as I said, a very extensive article written about that. I pointed out that we were engaged in academic freedom. There's correspondence, letters sent to President Leon Netterville with regard to the two professors who were fired at Southern University, George Baker and Joseph Johnson. Pointed out that our finances were stable. We were managing, but of course we continued to look for financial resources, and of course that fundraising was part of that effort for the GAP. We also, I pointed out that we were engaged in, members were engaged in police, looking at the police actions, the action of the police in 8 cities, and I indicated what they were, and that the following in the session, Mac Jones and others talked about the 8 cities that were involved: DC, Jackson, Atlanta, Philly, Chicago, St. Louis, Lincoln, and New Orleans. And some of those, there were consent decrees that were produced. We were fortunate to be able to award 2 fellowships. Now, I don't know whether we had reached the $1,500 level for both, but there was Frank Hardy, who attended Claremont Colleges, and Arthur King went to Atlanta. So that's something we can check on the exact dollar amounts, but we were actively engaged in that, and there was a fundraiser at the meeting as well. Now, in terms of the activism for our annual meeting, I won't. Yeah, see, now I'm running out of. I just take a copy of the program itself. The keynoter address by Robert Millender talked about being active and combining the activism and skullduggery of politics with the sophistication of politics. But a couple of points I'll make here is that with regard to public administration, Wilbur Rich gave a paper on health, politics, and administration from the Black perspective. Needless I say, the more things change, the more they remain the same. Here we are with the corona pandemic, and we're talking about the disparity in outcomes for Black and whites. And the other point I'll make in terms of activism was the Black attitude toward police. That was by, who was there? Marjorie Barnett. Chuck Stone was there, Marjorie Barnett. I thought that there were some others there too. Anyway, the point is, the problem that we have with police, of course, is still with us. I mean, Black Lives Matter. 50 years later, we started a conference 50 years ago or so with concerns about these issues, and there seems to more, as I say, things don't change. Political repression continues. With regard to some of the changes, the challenges and actions that we were successful in accomplishing during this time period, the graduate assistantship program became a major item, and the funding for it was we generated a lot of funds initially. And then it tapered off somewhat, but I must say that I followed that carefully for the early years, and I supported that financially as well. The presidential newsletters, not the president, the graduate. Let's see, I'm getting ahead of myself. The graduate assistant program. We also followed up with a meeting with a special report on Gary called It's Nation Time. That was something that we'd looked into, and that came out during the 72-73 period. We, in addition, the directory, biographical directory, we sent out about 300 notices. We got about 226 back. We published a directory in 1972. And I took account on the number of PhDs we had in this directory. We had been using the number of 70 or so for a good many years, but there was 170 PhDs listed in that directory. But not all of those, of course, the persons with PhDs were in the field of political science or actively teaching. What I can say is that after we got this directory, there was they had heard about us, and as part of the membership campaign, I did a lot of cold calls to members in the Eastern region and met a lot of people, and many of whom did indeed join Encodes as members. And so that was one of the enjoyable parts of the job, is meeting so many people and talking to them, and then seeing them later show up at our meetings. We initiated an institutional membership option in addition to the others that we had. And interesting enough, in terms of membership and support for the membership, we have these little brochures that we prepared that we sent out when we sent information to people. But the booklets that we had, where on the side where you would indicate what the student membership would be or a non-student, we had blanks, and we had a little stamp where we could stamp in whether it was $5, and it went from $5 to $10. And so we could, as the membership increased over time, we could change it and put it into our little booklet here. So we explored options of consolidating our publications, and then we separated it, but we were going back and forth over what we would do in terms of our publications. We never really settled on it during this period of time, but later, of course, we did. The membership was based. How's that?
We'll have an opportunity for more discussion.
Okay.
During the discussion part, I need to, because I want to make sure everybody has the notes.
Oh, okay. All right.
My alarm has gone off.
Okay. All right. So I've kind of rambled on, but what I plan to do is, just to wrap up, is I plan to take, and I've started already, these things that I've sort of talked about. I will prepare and send to the archivist. I did want to make couple of points. One is that you may know that we had an incident at the meeting. Following our 73 meeting, we went across the street at the 123 Club and we were not seated. And so there's paperwork in there related to that and how we went to the APSA because the APSA met in September the same year and things had been sorted out. The other is just one more thing, is that in terms of history, I wanted to say that I would encourage that members look at listen to the Black oral history. And you Shelby, is one of those where 17 Black political scientists were interviewed. And the only point I'll make there is that I want to point out that was not the EPSA, but Malcolm Jewell, I understand, was contributed substantially to the Black part of this. And we can talk about that if we have time. Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Daniels. Dr. McLemore?
Thank you. Sheila, thank you very much for putting this session together. You've done a lot of work, and we appreciate the work that you've done in pulling all this together. And I'm honored to be on this panel with my distinguished colleagues, and I'm sure Jill is looking down on all of us now, and so proud of the Southern University women who are doing great things. And I was just listening to Bill Daniel. You know, he went to college at the Upper Iowa University and then to the University of Iowa. And I was just thinking that Encodes rescued him. I mean, Bill Daniels was up at Upper Iowa University. I read someplace where he said on his first semester there were 2 Negroes there, and he was one of the 2 Negroes there on the campus. So without Encodes, Bill Daniels wouldn't have had a career in political science that was meaningful. So Bill, whatever money you have, you ought to send Encodes a big check because they rescued your academic career, man. I tell you, there's no question about it. So thank God for Encodes.
I'll do that.
Bill, I'm gonna really, okay, thank you. You really should, man. I was looking at some of the early beginnings of Encodes, and I was, of course, at the Baton Rouge meeting, and I had prior to going back to graduate school at UMass, I had taught for a year at Southern, and of course under the mentorship and leadership of Jill Lamar Preston. So I had that Southern connection before I went off to UMass.
Yeah.
To of course reassemble again in New York at the APSA meeting, which was the 65th meeting of APSA in New York. And at that meeting, we had at Southern agreed to make a series of sort of demands on APSA, and I was a part of that group and a part of that setting. And in November of 1969, Vernon Gray and I wrote an unpublished paper that really captured some of the dealings at the APSA meeting in New York. And I just want to say parenthetically that I am so pleased and happy that when I went to UMass in September of 1966, Vernon Gray was Southern was there. And we both had master's degrees from Atlanta University at the time. Vernon had taught for several years at Philander Smith, and I had taught for a year at Southern. And it was just a pleasure to have another Black person in the political science department at UMass. Although we didn't have a lot of classes together, but just knowing that Vernon was there was really meaningful. So I want to say to Vernon Gray, thank you, Vernon, for being at UMass with me. But back in New York. So at the Baton Rouge meeting, we had agreed to exact some demands on the APSA. Got to New York. We called at the initial meeting the black persons who were in Baton Rouge, and we had the New York gathering, and it was disorganized, and we had great discussions, and we agreed to disagree, and we disagreed a whole lot. And then we had a follow-up meeting, and I think it was in Mac Jones's room, and we agreed to reassemble and place some more demands upon the APSA. I came up with about 10 demands, and we watered down to about 6. And these 6 demands sort of constituted moving forward with the eventually development of Encodes. And the first demand was that we demand that APSA support and finance and political science and extensive exchange program among black colleges and universities, especially between schools with full staff departments and understaffed departments. And number 2, we demand that the APSA establish a special fund for black faculty research. Number 3, we demand that APSA use its influence to provide tangible support for the creation of an institute for black policy. We had at Southern agreed to make it to be housed at a black university. We demand that black representation on the executive council of APSA be expanded beyond the current black tokenism. Number 5, we demand that we had at Southern agreed to the director to be filled by a black person who will be concerned on a continuing make a series of sort of demands on a part of that group and a part of that setting. And we demand that APSA sever its relation to unpublished paper that really captured some of the meeting in New York and debating against black people in any form. That really captured, so those were some of the dealings at the APSA meeting. Master's degrees from Atlanta University at the time, Vernon. That APSA committee on the status of blacks, the APSA committee on the status of, I just want to say parenthetically that I am so pleased and happy that when I had taught for a year at some APSA, all of this grew out of those 6 demands, and eventually the following year, of course, led to the development of the National Conference of Black Political Scientists. And that group, and it was just a pleasure to have another black person in the group. That meeting in New York provided that foundation for Encodes. And so I am just proud and privileged to be able to at UMass, although we didn't have a lot of classes together, to be in this panel with all of you and to be here with Bill, who was every step of the way, and Shelby, who was there with us, because Shelby, for a time after she returned from Africa, came back to UMass and introduced herself to me and others. And then Shelby decided that she had enough snow, so she went back south. But we have these relationships that are important. So the early founding of Encodes with the caucus several years of Jewel, and of course the money we got from the Ford Foundation when Sam Cooke was one of the program directors at the Ford Foundation, that eventually led into the development of Encodes, and of course the Atlanta. And it was just a pleasure to have another black person in the university graduate program in political science. Let me move on and just say very quickly, during my administration, I served as president 2 terms. Tandy Tollerson, who was at Fisk, resigned, so I served his term and then another term. And I really remember that we emphasized the international relations was dimension, because in the early days of Encodes, we really emphasized the international dimension. We were not as pragmatic as the black persons who were in as Encodes is now. We were much more theory oriented, and of course, we emphasize, as Bill has pointed out, activism was an integral part of what we were trying to do. And during my tenure as president, I made a special effort to reach out to the other HBCUs in Mississippi and Louisiana and Alabama. In fact, I made some trips. I made a trip to Grambling. It was disorganized, and we had great discussions. A trip to Southern and to New York. We called and tried to encourage greater participation in Encodes. I am struck by the fact that in my first term at a meeting in Washington, D.C., we held for the first time, and I think it was in Mac Jones, concurrent sessions of Encodes. We had 2 concurrent sessions going on during the Washington meeting, and we had this partition between the concurrent sessions. And I recall that there was a lot of traffic. It was disorganized, and we had great discussions and between the concurrent sessions at Encodes during that meeting. But that was the beginning of Encodes sponsoring concurrent sessions. And then looking at the program this year, and there's several concurrent sessions. I came up with sessions being held. So in that early beginning, we laid, I think it was in Mac Jones' room, the foundation for what Encodes is doing now. So let me move on quickly and say, in terms of my vision for Encodes in the future, moving forward with and I said this, I think, in Baton Rouge, so I'm going to the first demand isn't the hell I said, but number one, I think we need a full-time executive director, and I think we should go on record in support of that. And I think the fundraising effort that is being directed by Pod and some other people should gear up so we can really have a full-time executive director at Encodes. The second point I shall continue to make it, I think Encodes need to reconnect with HBCU. I came up with about 10 demands that we water down heritage, although I think it's still important that our executive is at Mississippi Valley, which is an HBCU, but we need more involvement from the HBCU community in the life of Encodes. And these 6 demands are constituted moves. And I saw on the program where there was an effort devoted to at least beginning to address this issue, but I think that should be an appointed commission that will work on ways to reach out to the HBCU community to get more young African Americans and people of other colors involved in the life of the organization. And so I think we have to go beyond tokenism in terms of reaching out to the Black community, because if we're going to produce more African American political scientists, we're going to have to go to these institutions where we have undergraduate and graduate students studying political science, but a large cadre of undergrad students are at these institutions, so we should reach out to them. And I'm not disregarding other people, but I just think it's important that Encodes maintain this. I am delighted again that Sheila carrying on this tradition, and to have this panel so people can learn more about the beginning of Encodes and the history of Encodes is important. And I hope and trust that some of the graduate students that are attending this conference will have the opportunity to see some of this panel so they will know and learn more about the history of Encodes. Again, Sheila, thank you very much for inviting me.
I'm sorry, I was muted too. Thank you so much for your presentation, Dr. McLemore. Dr. Scott? You're muted, you're muted. Unmute.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to also add my thanks to Sheila for continuing the the history, trying to preserve the history of Encodes. And I said, when I retire, I guess I'll be like Bill Daniels, and I can go through all of my old boxes and pull out and recall some of the history of Encodes. I did last year, when we were doing the 50th anniversary, I did find a box, and I did find some old typed letters I had sent out as president with carbon copies. So
Yeah.
that's where we were when I was president. We were in old school days.
There you go.
But I was not looking to become president of Encodes. I was drafted into being president by my Atlanta University colleagues. I think it was Shelby's time to be president. And I think Shelby maybe ran off to Africa, signed on with some big project to the point that she told Mac that she couldn't run. And so I ended up being drafted. But I hadn't finished writing my dissertation.
Oh boy.
But knowing Mac, knowing Mac Jones, that Mac Jones had a plan. That way he knew he would make certain that I got my dissertation done, is to say that, okay, we're gonna put you up for president. And there are a lot of people in the organization fussing about the fact that you don't have your doctorate. So you're gonna get your doctorate right away.
And with the leadership of
So I did do that. I was fortunate as the incoming president at that time, and I don't know whether that's still the case, that you had to be the program chair for the conference the year before you became president. And so I was fortunate enough to be program chair for the 10th anniversary of the organization.
Yeah, we made that change.
Okay. And so we had a very good conference for the 10th anniversary. And at that time, Encodes was more of a radical organization. You come there and you run into a lot of Pan-Africanists and people fighting for the struggles in liberation struggles, et cetera. So when you come to Encodes, you'd come to sit down and listen to a lot of people telling you things about what was happening around the world. And when you look at the resolutions that we passed, that was the highlight of the conference. It seemed like it's what resolutions we were going to pass and what statements we were going to make. And so my incoming year, we had 2 resolutions that we passed. One was that we supported an independent Black political party. And so we don't hear too much about that. But at that time, there was a lot of movements, and Ron Walters was very much involved in this independent Black political party, and I became involved. I remember writing an article about an independent Black political party. Anyway, Encodes went on record of supporting an independent Black political party. And later that year, there was a National Black Political Convention in Philadelphia, which didn't get a lot of play, but it was held in Philadelphia in November.
Remember that
and we were there. We had representatives there, but it didn't ever materialize because there was a lot of, I guess, disagreements about how this should come about. It didn't have funds, and most of the elected officials were Democrats, and they were not interested in starting an independent Black political party. Some of this had started back in '72 with the Gary Convention, but this was a smaller group that continued to try to set up this independent Black political party. The other resolution that we did that year was supporting the independence movements in Africa. And the person we honored at the banquet, of course, he didn't make it to the banquet, was Mugabe, that we gave him our highest honor. And so,
struck by on record and some other people should gear up.
Okay, and so we honored him, but he was not able to come. But somebody came there to to represent him. Of course, that was before Mugabe became the Mugabe that he was before he died. And those of you all understand what I mean there.
I'm looking at the program this year, and that there's several women at Mississippi Valley, which is an HBCU, but we need more involvement.
Okay. And so the other thing that I remember doing when I was president was trying to expand the.
Number one, I think we need. I think that.
There's some static. We tried to expand the membership of the organization because we were primarily concentrated at certain universities and in certain sections of the country. And so what we tried to do is identify people in the Midwest and the Far West, not just California, but some of the other places in western part of the country. And we tried to get them to sign up members for Encodes. And also when we'd go to the APSA, we'd try to identify people that we saw who were not connected to Encodes and try to recruit them. The GAP, as Bill Daniels has talked about, the GAP program, the Graduate Assistance Program, was still very viable at that time. Margie Barnett was very much engaged with that. She and Sheila were two of the major fundraisers at that time. And so during my presidency, we had a big fundraiser scheduled for the Jamaican embassy, I think it was. And we were asking, Margie Barnett had this whole exhibit of Black memorabilia. And so we were using that exhibit to attract people to pay the money to come to the exhibit. I didn't get a chance to get to the exhibit that day because my father died that day, but Margie and Sheila carried on and had a very successful fundraiser. Also during my presidency, I was involved with liquidating our first journal. We had the Journal on Political Repression, and we had finally voted to discontinue the journal because several things. One, we didn't have money. We had been given a grant by the Commission for Racial Justice of the United Church of Christ, and that's how we had run the journal in those early years. But secondly, there was a lot of disagreement about what the mission. Some people felt like it was too radical, and they felt like this shouldn't be the journal of Encodes. And so we ended up just deciding just to close it down. And so that was one of the things I was engaged with closing down the journal. So Sheila asked us to talk about, looking at the future of Encodes. And I was just giving it some thought. Oh, one other thing I need to mention about the journal is that once we decided to close down the journal, we were still tasked with trying to have a journal. And so one of the things we did, somebody was on the board, I think, of the Black Scholar. And we started talks with the Black Scholar. And we had worked out an agreement where we would do one sponsored edition of the Black Scholar that Encodes would sponsor to be our issue. But when we brought that to the council, it was voted down because people say, instead of taking that money and giving it to the Black Scholar, let's save that money and develop our own journal. And so I'm very happy that we did get our own journal 10 years later, the National Political Science Review, and I was invited to serve on the editorial board of the National Political Science Review. So where are we now, and what do I see for the organization moving forward? Let me just say that I was not active in the organization for quite a few years. I was pursuing other career opportunities that did not allow me to come to Encodes and be involved. And so when I came back to Encodes, I was very pleased to see that Encodes had a lot of young people, a lot of new people that I didn't know. And these were new people who were serving as president and other offices. And as I had observed, a lot of Black organizations did not survive organizations that were organized around the time that Encodes started. And one of the reasons why I think they didn't survive is because they didn't allow room for young people to have leadership positions in those organizations. Whereas in Encodes, young people were pushed into those leadership positions. Like Mac Jones was pushed me into being president of, he and Alex Willingham are president of Encodes. And so that's how Encodes has survived, is because young people have been allowed to serve in leadership positions. And I was glad when I came back, none of the founders were still trying to be president. Leslie had moved on and say, okay, somebody else needs to be president. I've been president for 2 years. So I think that's one of the great things about Encodes, is that we move aside as part of the older group and allow the younger people to take over. But I just want to close with sort of how Leslie was closing, is that one of the things that I'm most disgusted about is that these many years later, we still don't have a paid full-time executive director. And when I came back and I was drafted by Todd Shaw to serve on this development committee to help to try to raise money for Encodes. And I've been working with some of you on here, Desiree, and some others we've been working for the last few years, trying to get money to hire a full-time executive director. And so that's one of the things I want to see before I pass off the scene, is I want to see us get a full-time executive director. And I look at other organizations. Of course, a lot of those other organizations have taken corporate money, and Encodes traditionally has not taken corporate money except maybe for a particular activity or something. But I'm determined that with the group that we have now, with the development committee, that we are going to be able to raise the money so that we can get a full-time executive director, because we know we cannot depend on Kathy to donate her time for the rest of her life being a full-time unpaid person. And I don't think we'll find another Kathy to take that position. So that's one of the biggest challenges that we face, and one of my biggest disappointment in Encodes. But I am proud of what Encodes has accomplished over the years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Scott. Dr. Lewis?
All right.
Shelby, you're muted. Okay, you're okay.
All right. Thank you. My name is Shelby Lewis, and I was fortunate to be on the Southern University faculty when Jewel Prestige hosted the meeting that led to the establishment of Encodes. I worked with a number of committees with Jewel Prestige, Alex Willingham, May King, and others, including GAP. And my understanding and memory is that we were setting up GAP as a 501(c)(3)
We did.
so that we could free the larger body to engage in political activity. But I don't think that was carried on. The information was carried on. I attended the APS meeting in 1968 in New York when Adolph Reed Sr. used very choice words to challenge the hypocrisy of APSA. And it is out of that we really moved on to found Encodes in 1969. I was unable to go to the 1970 conference because my first child was born in April 1970, and that meeting was in March. Now, Elsie talks about Mac pushing her to be president. Elsie, I was in Zambia at the time. You said ran away somewhere. I was doing research. But when I got back, Elsie said, you ought to be president. You want to be president. And I said, well, why not? So because of Elsie, I followed she and Jewel as the first three females who were presidents of Encodes. In 19, that term began in 81 when I was the program chair and vice president of Encodes. I was also vice president of the African Heritage Studies Association, which was also founded in 1969. The political scientists and Africanists had joint interests and joint memberships in both of those organizations. But I was also aware, and many of you know, that I was establishing the Africana Women's Studies program at the same time. And Lynn Jeffries was president of AHSA. He was also an Africanist and political scientist, like me and many others, who were financially and intellectually vested in both organizations. Since I was the designated program chair for NCOBPS in 1981 and AHSA in 1981, I proposed collaboration and a joint conference. And fortunately, my proposal was agreed upon. Before I go on there, I just want to get back to Leslie McLemore at the University of Massachusetts. So pleased to have one other Black person in the political science department. Well, Leslie, I was there in 1960, and there were 3 Black men on the program. I mean, in the department. So something happened between 1960 and 1968, whenever you came. I don't know whether you brought that to the university or not, but we had 3 very active Black men, and I was there. So there were 4 of us in the department at that time. Also in 1981, I was on the faculty of the Atlanta University Political Science program. And all of us were aware that the department in its new political science program was under a view that Mac Jones had, that we are an African people. And so being an Africanist and a political scientist, I was very comfortable putting together the conference, the joint conference of political science and African studies, and African heritage. And of course, many of us were pleased to attend the joint conferences because we didn't have to use our meager salaries, and most of us did have meager salaries at that time, to pay for 2 separate meetings. And that, I think, was one of the factors that contributed to a very good turnout. In 1981, the meeting was in Baltimore, Maryland. In 1982, the meeting was in New Orleans. But we had a good turnout, not only of the faculty members from HBCUs and other places, but graduate students from Atlanta University and Howard University turned out in big numbers. I must add that Africana women's voices increased the interest and participation in both conferences. In 1982, Lucius Barker took the mantle of the presidency of Encodes and demanded that I give him all the information that was available from the time that I was president and even before. I told him that I had walked in Jewel and Elsie's footsteps, and I would have to go to them to get some materials. And then Leslie McLemore and all of the others who had served had the information. But Lucius was not willing to take my word for it. He pushed me and pushed me, and I had to write up and give him letters that I had written and all the rest. But to sum up what my agenda was, I would give you 3 issue points. 1, I was interested in international outreach to Africanists and political scientists from the continent and the diaspora. 2nd, I was interested in close collaboration between, can you hear me? Sheila, okay, you were shaking your head. I was interested in close collaboration between AHSA and Encodes because we were kindred. And 3rd, I was interested in introducing Africana women's studies to political scientists and Africanists, so that we could work together. Now, Sheila told me, I don't know whether others of you received the message, that we had about 10 minutes to talk. My 10 minutes is almost gone, but some people took more time. Sheila, is there a problem?
Somebody was insistently ringing at my door. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry I had to just.
No. I was looking at your face and I gathered there were concerns. All right.
They
Well,
kept ringing my doorbell.
oh,
And
goodness,
I couldn't figure out who in the world was.
out there. Okay. Let me stay within my lane and indicate that I am pleased, just as Elsie and Leslie and Daniels are, that Encodes has grown and that it's moving forward. But I agree, and I agreed with you, Leslie McLemore, at the meeting in New Orleans, that HBCUs should be more involved, and we should make efforts to involve HBCUs. But my vision includes more collaboration, joint planning, and strategic actions between and among Encodes, AHSA, African Women's Studies, history, and other disciplines, because the challenge the challenges that we face as African people are global. And we must find a way to work and struggle together to knock down the racial barriers to our survival and freedom. So it is my hope that all of us will join in working not only with Encodes, but other organizations, so that this survival and freedom that is really at risk right now can be carried forward through a joint, very united struggle against racial injustice. And I'm going to stop right there so that if there are comments and questions, we have a little time to answer them. Thank you very much, Sheila, for inviting me to participate.
Well, I would like to extend my thanks to all of you. You represent so much history of our organization. And of course, you know, as I said in the beginning, Encodes is where it is today because of the beginning. And for me, it's so important that as we continue to grow as an organization, that we don't forget our history. And I do see 11 participants here. So if there are anyone who would like to ask a question, please feel free. Oh, my buddy. Go ahead. You're welcome. Thank you. A future president.
Thank you all so much for this. I was looking over the program and I had to stop by to pay homage to those who laid the foundation for this organization. I came along at Mississippi Valley State University under the tutelage of Kathy Golden, Ricky Hill, Mac Jones, and so many, Dr. Hare, who ran the Delta Cultural Institute. And so at the time, I was under the impression that I was going to be a lawyer. A young boy from across the street, Itabena, Mississippi. I came to Valley and Dr. Tanzinski Lee was the chair of the department, and they were influential in really bringing me into political science and also inspiring me to join the academy. And so listening at these incredible stories about how Black political science was formulated and founded and organized through a formal organization is inherently powerful. And as one who is a relatively young scholar, I recognize the importance of paying homage to those who come before us. And I look forward to working and to expand Encodes and to improve the organization for years to come. I think that it is so much in terms of my own development, not be where I am today were it not for Encodes. My first publication was because of Encodes. My first job was because of Encodes. And seeing members who just were doing excellent work, members who were researching things that I was interested in has just really inspired me. And every time I come to Encodes, I leave with the empowerment to continue my research. You know, sometimes you get to write and then you get rejected and you feel down, but seeing people who are doing the work that I'm doing and are really producing scholarship that matters just really empowers me to keep going. And so this was an excellent panel. I think that the reach of this organization is just profound in terms of the mentorship that's available and the different individuals. And I know we probably don't all know each other personally, but what connects us is that linked fate and that concern for the Black predicament and bearing witness to that in our scholarship and in our service. And so we are forever, I know I'm forever indebted to so many of you who've been a part of my life as a graduate student. As a graduate student at the University of Mississippi, I was invisible there. There were no Black people to work with. There were no mentorship available, but because I knew Kathy, because I had come up under DeAndre at Jackson State, I had the theoretical foundation to really write a research program that would enable me to really engage in some serious investigations of questions that I was interested in. And so to witness this history, I think that at some point we need to document this in an edited volume or document it some type of way so that we will have this as part of our record and our history. So thank you guys for believing in me. Thank you for empowering me, and thank all of you for your descriptive representation that enabled me to see people who looked like me, who were doing the work that I was interested in. And so for that, I'm eternally grateful.
Thank you, Emmett. Anyone else in the audience would like to, I can't really see you.
Yes, I would.
Celia.
Hi. Greetings, everyone. So good to see everybody. I'm sorry I was late. I'm multitasking as well on a couple of things, but from the part that I was able to hear, I think it is absolutely fascinating, the work that you all have done building Encodes. I think, you know, even the conversation that we just had earlier today on the Atlanta school and talking about Mac Jones' work as the first president, I think he has, you know, raised some issues that we're grappling with, and that I think the organization also can be in greater dialogue about. But for sure, you know, it's always good for us to have spaces where we can come and talk and about things that are important to us and that matter to us, as the brother just said, who spoke before me. So I just want to say that I definitely always pay homage to the elders who, you know, light the path for us, and just know that we're all here to support the organization and continue the struggle. Thank you for all that you've done.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to say anything or ask any questions to our founders? I mean, our presidents. I'm making some of them up.
Kim?
Bill?
Hi, Dr. Martin.
Kim has a question.
No, I also would like to offer my gratitude and appreciation to the presidents and the founders that are on the call. I'm a long-term member of NCOBPS, and each year I come, it is, as many have said on this call and other panels, it is a family reunion. It's part of my family. I refer to it as the NCOBPS family, and I have many friends and many mentors in the number, and it's always an exciting and a rejuvenating time for me to attend the meeting, and I learned so much from the elders and the founders. And I just wanted to say thank you to Dr. Daniels, Dr. McLemore, Dr. Lewis, Dr. Scott, Dr. Martin, for all the important work that you did so early on to push not only the discipline, but specifically the American Political Science Association to do better, to be more inclusive, to recognize the important work of African-American scholars and the need for greater diversity and inclusion and equity. And I just say thank you personally, but also on behalf of the American Political Science Association for that work. I know it wasn't easy, and it's just such a blessing to be able to speak to you, to learn from you, and to see the benefits of the work that you did in creating such a wonderful association and organization as NCOBPS. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll just say that moving forward, I think it's important that we activate that capital campaign. That's I don't know where the status is at this point, and use that to continue to identify the issues that are important to us, not only here in the United States, but globally. And also, the NCOBPS has done a wonderful job of identifying and mobilizing the leadership for our academic development and for building a better political science. And I appreciate that over the years, and I think they should continue to do that, and along with all of the other points that have been made as well.
Thank you. I think Dr. Smooth, I see, would like to say something.
I would. Thank you so much. This was a panel I couldn't afford to miss this afternoon, because I feel like I know that I've heard so many of these stories before, but I delight in taking the walk down memory lane. And I love to hear those moments of the radicalism at the roots of our organization. And it makes me laugh because hearing it today made me think about a moment in my own presidency when we were reviewing a resolution around Israel and Palestine. And some of the younger scholars in the organization were really wringing their hands. Like, this was, I gotta go get permission. I need to go alert my university communications people. I don't know if I can sign this. And the old guard of the organization were utterly disgusted with us. And it was because of that very sense of, we don't ask permission, young bucks. Understand, we do not ask permission. We lay the ground rules and we take the brunt of what comes with it. But navigating that little moment was a really kind of interesting and turbulent kind of moment for my presidency, because it was this real moment of us having to educate even our most junior scholars that this is what you're a part of. This is a part of the legacy of who we are. And then also trying to cozy up a little bit to my senior scholars and say, well, you know, we haven't been called like this before, you know, and really to kind of to navigate between those two spaces was really important. And I'll just share one additional to Elsie's point about our reluctance to take on corporate monies. And during my presidency as well, we had a moment in which there were opportunities to take on greater corporate sponsorship for the organization. And again, it was some of our younger scholars and then me as the intermediary explaining this, our roots are not here. This is not who we are as a core organization. And it was hard because, you know, Kathy wants to count dollars too. And so we were having quite a time. But it really refined. I give those examples because what I have gotten out of Encodes, in addition to what my colleagues have already said, is that you have an opportunity to bridge a historical presence with a future, right? And to stand in the middle of that and to learn how to negotiate between those two spaces are skills that you don't learn in every space that you enter, because some people don't want you to learn those skills. And so I am appreciative for the opportunities that I've had to grow through those kinds of moments of negotiation. The other thing I wanted to say is that in all of your stories, the thing that touches me most and in my own life as an NCOBPS member has sustained me is that the friendships are real. The friendships are sincere. The connection.
Hi, team. We are going to need to end this session. This is Annette. We need to end this session because we have another group that's trying to get into this room.
This is
So
in
I'm so
classic
sorry to do this
Encodes
to you, but we
style.
have to end.
Okay.
Thank you. This is in classic Encodes style. We'll move it to the lobby.
Thank you so much, Sheila.
The bar is popular.
But thank you. Thank you so much for pulling this panel together.
You're welcome. Thank
and
you.
the friendship.
It's 5:15. I misread my own thing. But anyway, I want to thank all of you for attending. I want to thank the panelists for agreeing to participate. And next year, we'll have another round of presidents. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
And I
Bye.
don't know how you all keep looking younger.
Bye, Mama Shelby.